as we look at the AFC South and where this division could go in 2021, to me it was always going to be a two-team race. It was going to be the Tennessee Titans and the Indianapolis Colts, both teams that made the playoffs last year. We're going to contend once again for playoff spots going into 2021 as well. And it was really a toss-up. As I was prepping and I was doing my research and I was, trying to make my projection, I went back and forth between the Titans and the Colts and who I thought was going to win this division. And I thought both teams were going to be playoff teams regardless. So whichever one didn't win the division, I thought would probably win a wild card spot. Now, that was before the Carson Wentz injury. Okay? I thought the Indianapolis Colts, here you have a strong running game, a stud offensive line, receiving weapons, a defense that's got a great defensive coordinator and a lot of good pieces to it. I was leaning toward the Indianapolis Colts, but I ended up going with the Titans ahead of them. But here's the thing with the Colts. Now that Carson Wentz is hurt, Carson Wentz is, projected 1 to 5 months injury because of his broken foot. First off, that's quite the range. Obviously, it determines of how much he can play with the pain and can he, not injure it further. But regardless, and I had seen today someone say 8 to 10 weeks is what they anticipate him being out with a hurt foot. If Carson Wentz is out 8 to 10 weeks, like it's being kind of projected, that means he's missing the whole first month of the season. All of September, he'd be ready to come back in October. And yeah, you're missing 4 games. But in my opinion, 4 games could be the decision, the difference in winning the division or not. They have to rely, the Indianapolis Colts have to rely now on Jacob Eason as their starting quarterback. And it's going to help. It's going to help that they've got a strong running game, that they've got good offensive line. They've got weapons. Jacob Eason coming into the NFL draft, day 2 pick, strong arm out of Washington, but he was raw. He left Washington early. He didn't play a ton there after transferring from Georgia. A lot of tools, but lacking that experience, lacking that refinement. And so there was some issues there, some concern. And then it comes out that, Jacob Eason really truly redshirted this past year in the NFL. They had Jacoby Brissett, the Colts did. They had Phillip Rivers. And, usually you think, oh, well, Jacob Eason's running the practice team. Nope. Jacoby Brissett was running the Colts practice squad. So you had Phillip Rivers as their starting quarterback. Jacoby Brissett was the backup and running scout team. Jacob Eason really didn't get any meaningful reps. So now you're hoping, and he's going to have the rest of the training camp. He's going to have preseason to get him up to speed, I should say. But that's a big jump for Jacob Eason to go from not really taking any meaningful snaps as a rookie to now being a starter on a team that's looking to make not only a run at the division, but a deep run in the playoffs. With Carson Wentz, if Wentz could have gotten back to what he was a couple years ago, it's not a stretch to say the Colts are challenging, to get to potentially an AFC Championship game. You got to get past the Chiefs. Got to get past the Bills. Hey, got to get past whoever's in the North. Got to get past the Titans. But they had on paper a lot. If Carson Wentz is a big if to begin with. A big if because Carson Wentz looked terrible last year. The Eagles gave up on him. Maybe it was the personality or whatever it was, but they gave up on him and traded him away. And so the Colts were hoping new scenery, reuniting with the old coach, an old coordinator, could really jumpstart him and get him back. But what we're seeing is what we saw in Philadelphia. Carson Wentz is injury prone. Concussions, knee injuries, now a foot injury. Almost every single year, Carson Wentz hasn't played a full season without getting hurt and missing time. And we're seeing it now with the Colts here. And it's going to cost him games. Even if Jacob Eason comes in and plays well, he's not going to, he doesn't have the experience. He's still limited. They're going to go run heavy, take some deep shots to Michael Pittman and T.Y. Hilton and Paris Campbell. But I think this Carson Wentz injury drops them out of my pick, or contending for my pick to win the South. And I think the Colts still finish second in this division, still push for a playoff spot, a wild card spot, but I think they're going to be at the bottom of that wild card hunt trying to get in rather than being that top wild card team. Now that leaves the Tennessee Titans. My pick to win the AFC South, they were going to be the pick for me before the Carson Wentz injury, but that just completely solidifies it. Look at this team. Look at the Titans. A couple years ago, they made that big run into the AFC Championship game. Last year, they continued to play well, made it into the playoffs. This team's talented, and it all starts on offense. Ryan Tannehill continues to play well, continues to be underrated. He's not going to be a top 5 quarterback. He's not going to get mentioned in the same breath as Patrick Mahomes and Tom Brady and all those guys, and he shouldn't. But he's a top, I think he's, borderline top 10 starter in the league. I'm not going to go through and say, he's, go through the top 10, but he's borderline top 10 quarterback in the NFL. But he doesn't even have to, because he's got Derrick Henry to hand the ball off to run behind a solid offensive line. Derrick Henry's going to push once again, close to 2,000 yards. They're going to rely on Derrick Henry, but they're much more than that. A.J. Brown's a stud. They added Julio Jones, and I love their addition of Julio Jones because it adds some more dynamic ability to this offense. They don't have to be as one-dimensional, and teams were going to focus in the passing game on A.J. Brown, and now getting Julio Jones, it takes that pressure off of trying to fit the ball into A.J. Brown, who's going to be our number 2 guy. You've got one of the best receivers that we've seen in the last I don't know how many years, and we've seen some good ones, but you got Julio Jones, who doesn't have to be the entire offense. Okay? He doesn't have to carry the load like he has the last several years in Atlanta. You got A.J. Brown on one side, you got Julio Jones on the other, you got Derrick Henry. It's going to be tough to stop this offense because you can't load the box to stop Derrick Henry, because now you have 2 elite receivers to throw the ball to. And I think that offense is going to be big, and they're going to put up points, and they're going to be tough to stop because they're going to need to. The defense has got talent. Right? They've got good defenders. They've got a good defensive-minded head coach, but they do have a few weaknesses. Jeffrey Simmons is a stud on the field. You get into Bud Dupree to go, hopefully give you a little pass rush opposite of Harold Landry. You got Rashad Evans inside. They've got talent on that defense. It just maybe hasn't played to where they'd like to the last several years. But I think they're still good. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying the Titans defense isn't good, but they got concerns. But they've got the offense, I think, that's going to be able to help ease some of those concerns, help maybe develop some stuff until they kind of get things going. But I think the Titans win this division. I think they're a playoff caliber. Obviously, they're a playoff caliber team. I think they have a chance to win multiple games in the playoffs. And I think this Carson Wentz injury for the Titans is going to let them get that, the lead early on in the season and maybe hold off the Colts, who might make a late rush if Carson Wentz comes back and gets back to form. Now, it's a top-heavy division. Okay? Colts, Texans, both playoff caliber teams. The second half of the division, those are, the Jaguars and the Texans. I think they're going to be, they're top 10 picks. And starting with the Jaguars, I am fascinated. I'm anxious. I cannot wait to see what Urban Meyer in the NFL is going to look like. Is he going to be one of those college coaches that comes in and totally is terrible? Is he going to be Greg Schiano? Is he going to be Steve Spurrier? Or is he going to come in and be Nick Saban and do all right, but just never get over the top? Or is he going to come in and be one of these college coaches that ends up going and having success? And beating Jacksonville, he's got his work cut out for him. Now, it helps having Trevor Lawrence, and Trevor Lawrence, I think, is the best quarterback to come out since Andrew Luck. I think he's got all the talent to have success in the league. It's just a matter of putting him around that talent. And the Jaguars have a lot of holes. The offensive line's not very great. He's got some solid receivers, but no elite receivers. He's got, quality running backs, but, it's not like a Saquon Barkley. We're going to see a lot of who Trevor Lawrence is and how talented he is. Can he load this team on his back and will them to some victories or keep them in games? Joe Burrow last year had some weapons around him, not any elite weapons around him, but he had some good weapons around him, and he's able to show that promise and show that talent. I want to see if Trevor Lawrence can do that. Defensively, once again, they're continuing to build. And I think the Jaguars are better this year than they were last year. And I don't think they're going to be contending for that number 1 overall pick. But it wouldn't surprise me if they're in the top 5. It wouldn't I think they're going to be in that maybe 4 to 10 range. I don't probably that, let's say 4 to 6 range. I think they're still going to be flirting with that top 5 pick. But I think the team is better. I think the team is coached better. They're going to win some games maybe that they shouldn't. They're going to win some games that they should. And I think they're going to get, rattle off 4 or 5, wins and keep them out of that top hunt for the number 1 overall pick as they're continuing to build this team. Now, the Houston Texans, rounding out the AFC South. The Houston Texans are a team, in my opinion, are one of the favorites to have the number 1 overall pick. And a lot of how their season is going to happen or play out all depends on Deshaun Watson. What is Deshaun Watson's playing status for the 2022 season? If Deshaun Watson doesn't play, it should be a lock that they have a number 1 overall pick. Should be a lock. Tyrod Taylor's not a bad quarterback, but he's not a guy that's going to win your team games when you need to. Going to make those huge plays. He's going to make plays. He's talented. He's an NFL quarterback, don't get me wrong, but he's not an NFL starting quarterback. And they don't really have anything around him. They traded for Anthony Miller from the Bears, who's probably going to be their best weapon, and it tells you how bad, the Texans' weapons are. You got him, Brandon Cooks. They just traded Randall Cobb away to the Packers to appease Aaron Rodgers. But this team doesn't have talent. They've Laremy Tunsil's a good left tackle. They've got a few other offensive linemen that are solid, but their running backs aren't. The running backs aren't great. The receivers aren't good. You got no real true weapons, and so that's going to hurt them. Even if Deshaun Watson plays, and we don't have no idea what's going to happen until probably tomorrow after this gets posted. But Deshaun Watson could play the whole season. He could play none of the season. He could play half the season. He could whatever. I don't know. Regardless of who their quarterback is, they're challenging for that number 1 overall pick. Even if Deshaun Watson plays and plays well, there's just nothing around him. Hey, defensively, J.J. Watt's gone. I know he's been injured a lot, hasn't played full seasons. He's gone. Whitney Merciless is still there. He's got talent. They traded away Bernard McKinley, so they still got Zach Cunningham. They've got some pieces and some players on defense that aren't bad, but just like the offense, you've got some players that aren't bad, but there's just a lack of total talent, total depth that even, like I said, even if Deshaun Watson plays this season, they're challenging for that number 1 overall pick. If he doesn't play, I think it's a lock, guarantee, number 1 overall pick. Okay? This team just lacks talent, lacks elite players, and then I haven't got into their coaching. David Coley sounds like he's a great person. However he is as a wide receivers coach, it's not like Baltimore's had a ton of, talent, and he not really developed, and that could be more passing game concepts. But here's a guy that was never mentioned, potentially never considered by many people to be a head coach, and now he comes into a dysfunctional franchise with a roster that's lacking, and is he going to be the guy that gets them up and going? He's not a scheme guy. Is he going to be able to motivate them and organize them enough to get where they need to be? I don't think so. This team lacked talent. They barely had any draft picks. Their first draft pick was a quarterback that they're hoping they can groom into a potential starter someday, maybe a high-end backup. They got Nico Collins, I mentioned. You got Nico Collins. You got Anthony Miller. Brandon Cooks are your receivers. This team, to me, screams train wreck. Their organization screams train wreck. And I think that's going to end them up with the number 1 overall pick more than likely in the 2022 2022 NFL Draft.